You have seen the math. $2 million in the bank, a 6% withdrawal rate, $120,000 a year, and you walk away from work at 50. On paper, it looks clean. But there is a number those videos leave off the screen, and it is $38,400. That $38,400 is what the government quietly takes off the top before you spend a single dollar. Once you add the early withdrawal penalty and the tax on that money, and it is only the first leak. The second one is health insurance, because at 50 you are years away from Medicare and paying full price for coverage. Put those two together, and your $2 million plan can shrink into something closer to a $1,500,000 plan in under a decade. I have watched people do this without realizing it. They run the simple 6% number. They feel ready, and then the first year of real bills lands and the plan starts bleeding from two holes nobody warned them about. The hard part is how right it all feels on paper, right up until the first real year proves the paper wrong. Here is the good news. Both leaks are fixable, and the fix is not complicated once you can see it. Over the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how healthcare and taxes drain the bucket, and the one setup that plugs both at the same time. If you are a Gen Xer planning to leave work at 50, hit subscribe now, because I am going to walk you through the real numbers most retirement videos skip right over. Let me put real numbers on it. Say your $2 million sits inside a pre-tax 401k, which is true for about 9 out of 10 people your age. You want your $120,000 for the year, so you pull it. First, the IRS charges a 10% early withdrawal penalty because you are under 59 and a half. That is $12,000 gone. Then that same $120,000 counts as ordinary income, and your top dollars get taxed at around 22%, which is roughly another $26,400. Between the penalty and the tax, about $38,400 never reaches your checking account. That leaves you around $81,600. Now take out health insurance. A couple in their early 50s with no subsidy is realistically looking at $18,000 a year in premiums for 2026. Subtract that, and the $120,000 you thought you were spending is really closer to $63,600. That is the number they never put on the thumbnail. Here is the part that stings, and I want to say it plainly. This is not you being bad with money. You were handed a plan that quietly leaves out the two biggest costs of leaving work early. That is the whole reason so many people who retire at 50 end up back at a desk by 53. So why does this happen? The simple videos treat your $2 million like a tax-free, insurance-free pile of cash. In the real world, money inside a 401k has never been taxed, so every dollar you pull counts as income, and pulling it before 59 and a half stacks the penalty on top. On the health side, the enhanced subsidies that used to cap premiums expired in January 2026, so a household bringing in $120,000 now pays close to full price. And that premium is not a one-time hit. It lands every single month, whether the market is up or down, whether you feel wealthy that year or not. Stack all of that together, and your withdrawal rate is not really 6%. To actually cover $120,000 of spending, plus the penalty, the tax, and the premiums, you end up pulling something north of $160,000 out of the portfolio. And that is 8% of your money in the very first year. A 6% rate might survive 40 years. An 8% drain does not. That is the invisible cost. It does not show up as one big mistake. It shows up as your balance quietly falling behind every year until the math turns against you for good. The cruel part is that the portfolio never warns you. There is no alarm bell. By the time the shortfall is obvious on the statement, you have already lost years you cannot buy back. But once you can see the trap, you can step around it. And it starts with one change to how you take the money out. The fix comes in two parts, and neither one asks you to be a tax expert. The first part solves the penalty. The second part solves the premiums. Get both right, and the plan that looked impossible a minute ago starts to breathe. Start with the penalty. The IRS actually gives you a legal door out of the 10% charge, and it is called a 72T. It lets you take a fixed, equal payment from your IRA every year, based on your life expectancy, with no penalty, as long as you keep it going for 5 years, or until you reach 59 and a half, whichever comes later. There is also the Rule of 55, which lets you tap the 401k from the job you just left, penalty-free if you leave at 55 or older. But at 50, you are too young for that one, so the 72T is the bridge that carries you across those first years. Here is the math in plain terms. The IRS uses a life expectancy factor of about 33.3 for a 50-year-old. Take your $2 million, divide it by that factor, and you can pull roughly $60,000 a year with no penalty at all. That is $12,000. You are no longer handing over just for being early. You cover the rest of your spending from other buckets, and that is where the second part comes in. The second part is keeping your modified adjusted gross income, your MAGI, low enough to qualify for health insurance help. Even after the enhanced subsidies expired, staying under 400% of the federal poverty level still unlocks real premium credits. For a single person, that line sits around $56,520, and it runs a bit higher for a couple. The trick is where your money comes from. Your 72T counts as income, but money you pull from a Roth comes out tax-free and does not raise your MAGI, and money from a regular brokerage account is partly just your own original savings coming back, which also barely moves the number. So you might take $60,000 from the 72T, another $20,000 from a Roth, and the rest from a taxable account, and land your MAGI near the subsidy line instead of blowing past it. Do that, and your health premiums can fall from something like $18,000 a year, down into the $6,000 to $12,000 range. That single move can be worth more than $10,000 a year, every year, for over a decade. Over 10 or 12 years, that is well past $100,000 you get to keep, just for pulling your income from the right accounts in the right order. I used to think the 4% rule was the whole story. Then I sat with a family setting up their early exit and saw their health premiums come in at $18,000 a year, and it hit me that the standard advice skips an entire layer of the plan. But even a clean tax and healthcare setup has one weak spot, and it is the risk almost nobody stress tests properly. Say you fix the taxes and the healthcare perfectly. There is still one force that can break the plan, and it has nothing to do with your discipline. It is timing. Specifically, the order in which the market hands you good years and bad years. Look at what happened to someone who retired in 1973. The market fell about 48% from top to bottom over the next 2 years, and then inflation stayed high for years after that. A person who walked away that year and pulled 6% from their portfolio watched it fail inside about 15 years. Not because they went wild with spending, but because they were selling shares while prices were on the floor, and those shares were never there to recover when the market finally came back. This is called sequence of returns risk, and the reason it matters so much is simple. A bad decade at the start of retirement does far more damage than the very same bad decade in the middle. Money you pull out early, at low prices, is gone for good. It cannot ride the rebound. The research on this shows that a single 20% drop in your first year can cut the life of your portfolio by 7 to 10 years. Same average return over 40 years, wildly different outcome, all because of when the losses happen to land. Now picture yourself at 50 instead of 65. You are not planning for a 30-year retirement anymore. You are planning for something closer to 40 or 45 years. That makes those first years even more fragile because the pile has to last longer, and there is no paycheck coming in to cushion a rough stretch. The answer is not to guess the market. Nobody can. The answer is to make sure you never have to sell stocks in a crash just to pay the light bill. That usually means holding around 1.5 to 2 years of spending in plain cash or short-term bonds, parked on the side, ready. When the market drops, you spend from that pile instead of your investments, and you give your portfolio room to heal. That is why the real plan does not stop at taxes and healthcare. It builds a wall around your first decade. So let me show you what that looks like side by side. The fragile version and the resilient one. Let me lay the two versions of this next to each other, because the same $2 million can end very differently. The fragile path is the one most people fall into by accident. You skip the tax and healthcare setup, so your real drain runs past 8% a year. At that pace, a $2 million portfolio can be gone by the time you hit 65, right when Medicare finally shows up and you were supposed to be in the clear. Add a market drop with no cash on hand, so you are forced to sell stocks at the bottom, and the failure can come even sooner in your early 70s. That is the path where you quietly go back to work at 58, not because you want to, but because the numbers left you no choice. That is the quiet part of the fragile path. It never feels reckless while you are living it, which is exactly what makes it dangerous. The resilient path uses everything we just covered. The 72T kills the penalty. The lower MAGI pulls your health premiums down by half. You carry about $240,000 in cash, which is 2 years of spending, so a bear market cannot force your hand. That leaves roughly $1,760,000 still invested. Pull from it at a steadier 3.3%, and that is about $58,000 a year from the portfolio, with the other $62,000 coming from your Roth, your taxable account, or a little part-time work if you want it. Same $120,000 lifestyle, but now the plan can run 40 years or more without cracking. And here is what that second path really buys you. It is not just protection. It is choices. You can pick up part-time work because it sounds interesting, not because rent is due. You can take the long trip you kept putting off. You are not chained back to a full-time job because your plan sprang a leak you never saw coming. The money still matters, but it stops running your calendar. Knowing the two paths is one thing. Actually walking the resilient one takes a few concrete steps, so let me lay them out. Let me turn this into something you could actually hand to someone on a single page. 4 simple steps. Step 1. Set up the 72T if you are retiring before 55. You take your IRA balance and divide it by the life expectancy factor. On a $2 million account at 50, that is $2 million divided by 33.3, which comes out to about $60,000 a year, with no early penalty. The one rule you cannot break is that once you start, you keep those equal payments going for 5 full years or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is longer. Change the amount early, and the penalties come roaring back, with interest. So this is a set-it-and-commit decision. Step 2. Manage your MAGI so you keep the health subsidies. The goal is to hold your countable income under that 400% federal poverty level line, roughly $56,520 for a single person and higher for a couple. You do it by choosing which accounts you draw from. Lean on Roth money, which does not count, and on the return of your own contributions in a taxable account, which barely counts, to top up your spending without pushing your income over the edge. Step 3. Build the 2-year cash buffer before you ever leave. Set aside about $240,000 in a high-yield savings account or short-term bonds. This is not your emergency fund. This is your market crash shield. When stocks fall, you live off this money and leave your investments alone to recover. By the time prices climb back, and so far they always have, your shares are still there to climb with them. Step 4. Put the rest to work. After the buffer, you have around $1,760,000. Keep the long-term growth portion in a simple mix, something like 60% stocks and 40% bonds, and treat the years from 55 to 65 as a bridge you fund from a taxable account until the rule of 55 and later Medicare take over. The point of splitting it this way is that every dollar has a job and a timeline, so you are never guessing which account to touch next. I watched a family run this almost to the letter. They left work at 50 with $2,100,000, set the 72T at about $65,000 a year, kept their income under the subsidy line, and here is the part that stuck with me. During the 2022 downturn, their portfolio actually grew because their cash buffer meant they never had to sell a single share while prices were down. Even with every step in place, there is one last barrier, and it is not financial. It is in your head. Let me talk about that. Here is the strange part. Even people who do everything right often cannot bring themselves to spend the money. If you have saved $2 million, and the thought of pulling $120,000 out of it makes your stomach tighten, you are not broken. You are normal. There is a name for the pull behind it: loss aversion. Losing $1 hurts about twice as much as gaining $1 feels good, and your brain has spent 30 years in saving mode, trained to protect the pile and never to open it. Asking it to suddenly reverse and start spending feels wrong on a gut level. That is exactly why so many people with plenty keep clocking in anyway. The shift that helps is a small one. Instead of telling yourself you are draining your savings, treat it as turning your savings into a paycheck. Set up an automatic transfer that moves a set amount from your portfolio into your checking account every month, on the same day, like a salary landing. When it shows up looking like income, your brain stops treating each withdrawal as a loss and starts treating it as pay you earned. I remember the first month after a family I worked with set up their 72T. The father called me and said he felt like he was stealing from himself. 6 months later, he was on the phone mapping out a cross-country road trip. Same money, completely different feeling. Get past that block, and the numbers finally do their job. Let me close with one last reality check. So here is where it lands. Retiring at 50 with $2 million and spending $120,000 a year is genuinely possible. It just falls apart when you ignore the two costs the simple math leaves out: taxes and healthcare. Use a 72T now, or the rule of 55 later, to sidestep the penalty. Keep your MA low enough to hold on to your health subsidies, and carry about 2 years of spending in cash, so a bad market cannot force your hand at the worst possible moment. Do those 3 things, and the same $2 million that looked so fragile becomes a plan that can run 40 years or more, with room for the trips, the part-time work you actually enjoy, and the quiet peace of not watching the balance every single morning. If this gave you a clearer picture of what an early exit really takes, subscribe to Wes Investor. Every week I break down the real numbers, so you do not get caught by the traps most retirement videos skip right past. You do not need to be a financial expert to pull this off. You just need a plan that tells the truth about the costs. Now you have one.